It all begins with a young Clark Kent watching a movie with his friend. In the middle of the movie, an alien makes an appearance, scaring his friend. His friend comments that aliens are scary and this causes him to get upset. When he begins to cry, his friend's mother calls his father to come pick him up. She's confused as to why Clark has become so upset, but his father reassures her that the movie had freaked him out. On their way back home, his father asks him if he had told his friend anything. Young Clark does not reply as they reach home. Over the next few days, Clark becomes increasingly frustrated with himself, and constantly questions why he was different than everyone he knew. Years later, a grown-up Clark Kent works as a journalism intern. He talks to his parents on the phone and reassures them that he's being safe with his superhero powers. While he talks to them, a mysterious man dressed in all black watches him from across the street. He bids his parents a farewell and then heads to Star Labs, a research facility that was launching an orbital telescope to space with the help of LexCorp. This telescope would allow researchers to see if life outside of Earth existed. Just before the launch, Lex Luthor of LexCorp stands in front of several journalists to answer their questions. He tells them that he is only going to be answering one question and calls forward Lois Lane, a grad student who was the recipient of the Luthor Journalism Scholarship, to ask him a question. As Lois comes forward, she claims that LexCorp was being illegally funded by the government despite it being a danger to civilians. She then holds up her tape recorder and starts playing a recorded conversation that Lex had. In this recording, he proudly talks about how he had managed to outsmart everyone and get outrageously large funding from the government. Before the recording can finish, Lex's security guard grabs the recorder and smashes it to pieces. Hearing this, the reporters go into a frenzy and start shooting questions at Lex. At the back of the crowd, Clark talks to a janitor who tells him that inside the Star Labs facility there were containment cells and bizarre weapons, things that could be used to neutralize aliens. He claims that he thinks that people at Star Labs already know extraterrestrial life exists and are trying to prepare for it. Intrigued, Clark asks the janitor to let him inside, but he refuses, saying that he has a family he needs to provide for. He then points at the same man who had been watching Clark and tells him to be careful. Just then, a countdown begins and the rocket is launched. As the rocket breaks through the surface, its engines catch fire and it begins to head towards the city. Clark immediately jumps into action and maneuvers the rocket away from the city, pushing it towards space. The next day at the Daily Planet, Clark's boss introduces him and his colleagues to Lois Lane, whom he had promoted to a reporter. Not surprisingly, no one likes the idea of a grad student making it to the top so quickly, and they leave without greeting Lois. Later that day, Clark finds Lois inside the printing room and asks her how she managed to take down the most powerful man in the country. She tells him that powerful men have their guard down because they think no one can get to them. After she leaves, Clark notices that she was working on an article about him as Superman. The next morning, Star Labs announces that an unidentified being is headed Earth's way. Clark quickly jumps into action and flies towards the anomaly. There he meets Lobo, a bounty hunter. He informs Clark that because he's the last surviving Kryptonian, a large bounty has been placed on his head. The two of them engage in a vicious brawl where Clark struggles to get rid of Lobo. While fighting, the two of them crash into Star Labs' building. The janitor who had been watching the two of them fight manages to evacuate everyone, but before he can leave, he gets trapped beneath the rubble. Clark does not notice the janitor and continues fighting Lobo. All of a sudden, Lobo throws a device towards him that leaves behind a substance. Although Clark dodges it, the purple substance engulfs the janitor. Soon, reporters begin gathering outside to try and get a shot of Superman and Lobo. Clark punches Lobo, causing him to go flying back, but Lobo surprises him by hitting him with a stronger punch. With his energy drained, Clark falls to the ground, where Lobo beats him to a pulp. Just before he can finish, Clark, a Martian, an alien that matches Superman's strength, attacks Lobo. This gives Clark enough time to fly out towards the sun and replenish his energy. Once he gets his strength back, he gets down to Earth and attacks Lobo, successfully taking him down. The next morning, Clark goes back to work, where their chief editor is not pleased with the team's focus on Superman. He tells them that they need to get back to finding out more about the aliens rather than Superman. At the same time, Clark reminds Lois that she has an interview with Superman. She tells him that she will be pulling a power move and ignoring him until she can reveal his identity. She then tells him that she is going to interview Lobo, who is locked in Star Labs. Feeling rejected, Clark goes back to Smallville to visit his parents. He tells them that everyone has labeled him as an alien. His father reminds him that if anyone found out who he was, the government would lock him up. Meanwhile, the janitor's family waits for him to come out of surgery. The doctors remain confused about what had happened to him since every day an organ would fail. During one surgery, the doctor extracts his liver and is about to stitch him back up when he suddenly grabs her hand. He kills all of the doctors in the operating room and walks out. Back in Smallville, Clark and his parents are coming back from dinner when he suddenly asks his father to stop the car. As his father stops the car in front of their house, he finds the same man dressed in black standing in front of their door. He asks Clark's father where their son is, but when he starts asking questions, the man uses his powers that cause him to stop breathing. Just then, Clark comes out of hiding, attacking the man, who easily dodges his hits. The man introduces himself as John. John is the Martian who saved his life during his fight with Lobo. He tells Clark that he only wishes to talk to him elsewhere. The janitor enters a pharmacy and asks the Clark for drugs to help him with the pain. When the Clark refuses to help, he drains the man of his life and starts searching for fentanyl. Just then, two customers walk in. When they see the clerk's dead body, they try to escape, but the janitor kills them as well. Meanwhile, at the Kent house, Clark and the Martian sit together to talk. The Martian informs Clark that both of them are the last of their kind. When he had sensed Clark's powers, he had assumed that another Martian was alive and had tried to link their minds together. In doing so, he had gotten access to Clark's memories right before he was sent to Earth. He tells Clark that his mother had instructed him to not live in the past, which is why it is better to not see what those memories were. He then warns Clark and tells him to hide his identity, or else people will continue coming for him. As the Martian gets ready to leave, he tells Clark to listen carefully if he ever needs his help. With these vague instructions, he leaves. In the morning, Clark's mother hands him a new suit and a cape that she had made using the fabric that he was wrapped in when they adopted him. He thanks his mother, just as his father arrives home. He hands Clark a newspaper and reveals that Lois had published the first part of her exposé article on Superman. As he begins to read it, he finds that she was teasing something big but would not reveal what it was until she had interviewed Lobo. The scene then cuts to Star Labs, where Lois was waiting for Lobo to answer her questions. Lobo does not give her any straight answers. When she asks him if there are any more Kryptonians left, he lies to her before laughing at her reaction. Frustrated, Lois ends the interview and gets up to leave. She bangs at the door to inform the guards outside that she is done. However, she notices several dead bodies in the hallway. All of a sudden, the janitor shows up and breaks the door. She manages to get away just in time and starts recording. When he jumps to attack her, two guards show up and begin shooting at him. Their attacks do little to faze him, and he kills both of them. With him distracted, Lois makes a run for the door and hides behind the broken walls to record. The janitor goes up to Lobo's containment cell, turning into a parasite before breaking the cell. The two of them then escape from Star Labs and begin wreaking havoc in the city. At this point, Superman arrives. He helps Lois get to safety before being joined by the Martian. While he fights off the parasite, John helps civilians get away from danger. The parasite is too strong and manages to pin Superman. He starts to absorb Superman's life force. Before he can take away all of Clark's energy, the Martian arrives and starts to fight the parasite. Clark tries to warn John about touching the parasite, but he's too late, and John gets stuck. The parasite starts draining his life force as well, before using Clark's laser to set him on fire and kill him. Drained and feeling defeated, Clark returns home as he tries to recover. One day, Lois breaks into his apartment and tries to pull him out of his rut by telling him that the job they had picked is tough and he will need to push through to make it to the top. She reminds him that he needs to ask someone smarter than him for help at times. She had been referring to herself, but Clark thinks of Lex Luthor. He visits Lex in prison and asks him for a way to get him to space. Lex realizes that Superman has lost his powers and he needs to get closer to the sun. He agrees to help since it will look good to the parole board. Meanwhile, the parasite teleports himself to his home. He finds that his wife had been struggling without him. Just then, his daughter comes to the living room and notices him. Instead of hugging him, she starts screaming. On the other side, Lex takes Superman to his laboratory and tells him that the parasite not only absorbed his powers but also his weaknesses. The only weakness that Superman had was the stone from his planet Krypton. Lobo had the stone, and Lex had paid him to fight off the parasite along with Superman. The three of them then go to a remote island, and Lex uses all the power from the city to light the island up. This attracts the parasite, and as planned, it shows. Clark uses himself as bait while Lobo attacks the parasite. However, the parasite overpowers them and catches Lobo, who blows himself up to kill the parasite. This had the opposite effect, and it only grows stronger. Lex then retrieves the stone from Lobo's mutilated body and uses it to fire up a weapon. As the parasite drains Superman's powers, he fires at it, causing it to go down. This is when Lex double-crosses Clark and uses the same gun to fire at him. This drains all of his energy, and he goes down. In the nick of time, John suddenly appears and takes Lex down before he can kill Clark. While the two of them are distracted, the parasite wakes up. Clark realizes the parasite did everything, including his love for his family. He reminds him about his family and then turns around to address the crowd that had gathered. He tells them that he was born into a dying planet and was sent to Earth by his parents, who hoped their son would lead a better life. Once he stops talking, the parasite moves towards the crowd, where he spots his family. Before he can reach them, some of the civilians attack him, which further angers him. Superman tries to stop his attack and instead gets his life force sucked out again. Meanwhile, Lex notices a bright yellow light coming out of the control center. The parasite rushes towards it and starts absorbing its power. However, it is too much for him to handle, and he turns into stone. The stone then turns into dust, leaving behind the janitor's ash. A few days later, Clark meets with John and Lobo. Lobo had managed to survive because he was immortal. The movie ends with Lobo telling them that they are not the last of their kind before leaving for space again. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we'll see you in the next video.